Welcome. You've wandered into the Longevity Conference. We might be here for a long time, but you'll live a long time to enjoy it. I want to start by asking you to think very differently about longevity. We have four world experts, but instead of thinking about longevity as number of years lived, think about it as a mechanism of increasing productivity. And just to give you one data point, but you can extrapolate to each country that's represented here, in the United States, if people lived 10 years longer and decided, let's say, to work 3 more years, every 61-year-old, which is the average retirement age in the United States, worked until age 64, 3 more years, just that 1 year cohort. It's $1 trillion, $1 trillion to the GDP of the United States, and that would pay off some of the debt, but it would also make a huge dent in Social Security. And that same math applies across the globe to dealing with some of our social issues. So longevity is one of the mechanisms to address our financial woes as well. Now there's 4 different ways that I think we might think of longevity. There's the deaths of despair, there's problems with prevention, there's treatment of disease, and then there's regeneration. And one of the wonderful things about the Saudi 2030 vision is that it addresses all those in different ways that might allow what we learn here in Saudi Arabia in the region to leapfrog what we're trying to do in other parts of the world. Take, for example, the role of NGOs. The Society for Autism Families, which has bound together thousands of families, and Prince Saud bin Farhad is here somewhere. Put your hand up, Prince. He's raised $150 million to create an endowment for that. That deals with autism in a very innovative way with an endowment that pays for it. We have similar approaches that the Saudi Minister of Health is addressing that we've been personally involved with, trying to address mechanisms of identification of disease early and treatment of it in places of the country where that wasn't possible. There's an entire array of solutions represented here on the panel that I want you to hear from. So here's how I'd like to run this. I'd like to ask each panel member, because I can brag on them for longer than the half hour we have, to give a 1-minute summary of what's most important to you in your curriculum vitae, and then I'm going to bounce around asking questions that will hopefully tease out some of the elements that we've touched on. So, Dr. Wang, you want to go first?
I'm Gerald Chan. I'm trained as a scientist, but some 30 years ago sort of went to the dark side and became a venture capitalist. So I invest in biotech, but probably in distinction from many of my venture brethren, I don't invest just for the financial upside, and that's because we being private, we have the possibility of mixing, investment with philanthropy. So there are measures or interventions, which would be very good for the population, but there is not enough profit motive there to incentivize purely financial investors. So I work out of Boston, which is a mecca of biotech, and I invest or build companies across therapeutic areas, but also, looking for ways to improve health at the population level.
And you donate schools?
Yes, and my family had given a gift to Harvard University to have the School of Public Health named after my late father. That is where I trained myself. So I have quite a bit of emotional attachment to the school as well. When we made that gift, people said, what is public health? Why don't you invest in the medical school? Now, when the COVID pandemic happened, I think people became much more knowledgeable. Oh, public health, it is a discipline distinct from curative medicine. And we think, that at the population level, as opposed to working at the level of individual patients, there's a lot of bang for the buck, if we do public health well to improve the health status of the whole society.
Dr. Chen, thank you. Mehmet Khan has taken the role of leading evolution. If you want to identify one very concrete example of the Saudi leadership taking a step forward to fill a gap, it's to create the 2nd largest funder of longevity research on the planet behind the NIH. And I'd love it, as you describe your career and your accomplishments that allowed you to take this position, how you see your ability as a group to play a role filling the gap in where private investors can't?
So my primary role in life has been to attract the brightest minds and surround myself by them. And so the opportunity of transitioning from being an endocrinologist at the Mayo Clinic and seeing patients with diabetes and all the stuff that you also as a clinician we see, then going on to becoming a leader in one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world as president of their R&D center, to scale businesses. That 40-year career, I look back and look at all the things we've tried to change and make people comfortable or live with their disease, rarely being able to cure it.
Yeah.
It's a patching. So the opportunities, you think about this, all these chronic diseases that are now resulting in huge societal and economic burden, the vast majority are a result of the aging process, whether it's the US Medicare, the UK NHS, the Saudi health system. We spend disproportionate amounts of money treating the consequences of aging. And yet biologically, there's very good evidence that the aging biological process is not inevitable, right? And there are commonalities to, for example, and you and I have talked about this, if you can affect the biology of aging, you, by definition, will affect the risk of getting cancer. Because the number one risk factor for cancer is age. And the opportunity at this stage in one's career to bring together the brightest minds within the team around the world, fund that research, lead the field so that you can actually direct the direction it goes in, invest capital to create companies from it with patient capital, and have fantastic support from a board, our chairman, His Royal Highness, with the vision, which is on our website. We want to expand healthy lifespan for the benefit of all. And to me, that last statement was critical, which really personally connected with me. This is about impacting as many lives as possible in the world. We want to democratize the technologies we invest in, impact as many lives regardless of their location, their socioeconomic status, their religion, their race. It is for the benefit of all. And so we really look at this, and this was an opportunity. There's no way I was going to turn it down.
Well, I'm glad you're doing it. And we'll come back to some of those points that Dr. Khan mentioned. Dr. Robin Smith, I met at the Vatican. Please tell us why I was at the Vatican with you and a little bit about yourself.
Great. I'm Robin Smith, and I'm a physician, an entrepreneur, writer. I've done a lot with building companies and really trying to create tools and technologies to improve human health and reduce suffering. And so, to me, it's not about me, it's about everybody, how we pull people together, we pull our differences aside, and really focus to make a difference and see how we can provide tools to everyone to democratize healthcare. It's not going to be the same everywhere. And so how do we think out of the box, work together, and make sure that we're really doing things for people around the world?
And the Vatican?
And the Vatican was a great place to, a lot of my career has been in regenerative medicine, and I figured, well, if I can convince the Vatican that stem cells can be advanced and cell therapy can really advance health and disease and regenerative medicine, and that we can take the perspective of advancing this and still respect each other's beliefs and how we do that. That's how the relationship started. We have conferences. I wrote a book called The Healing Cell, and Pope Benedict wrote the foreword, and it's really about making a difference and educating people. And we know in the long run, longevity is affected by education early on. And it's such an important part to educate and work together and make sure we don't have redundancy in the resources and focus them together to make a difference.
Thank you, Robin. Sergey Young, one of the world's premier investors in regenerative medicine, longevity. These data points you'll see around us highlight the dramatic increase in longevity. It also is showing, for example, in this region of the world, the Saudi population is growing the fastest amongst older people now. Obviously, still growing faster among younger, but also people eventually become age 40, become age 50. So those data points will come up, and you're making an investment to make us live even longer. Why is that?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Sergey Young. I'm a founder of Longevity Vision Fund. In fact, I'm 52, and I'm turned 52 today. That is my birthday.
Birthday.
Yeah.
That's why you're all here.
Yes. another birthday of Longevity Vision Fund was back in 2018 at Vatican at the conference, and we took a lot of inspiration from Mahmoud and the whole story of creation of evolution. Thank you for that. The mission of my fund is to bring affordable and accessible version of longevity to the world. And it's only today with scientific discoveries and technological breakthroughs we actually can democratize it completely. You know, every company that we invest in, from gene editing, gene therapy to organ regeneration, use of AI for drug discovery, brings 10, 20, 50, 0% times improvement against the current practice. I'm very excited, and we live in the region, in the UAE for the last 2 years with all of my 4 kids, and I'm very excited to be here. I think this is the center of the change globally for longevity.
So Dr. Chan, let's talk a little bit about the economic incentives in the healthcare system. So with the Ministry of Health here, we've been looking at the process by which care is provided here, and should it copy how it's done, for example, in the United States? So even though we may organize programs to get care in the US, what should the system be here? And value-based care might be one of the solutions. You certainly and become an expert in it. Please, if you can, walk people through how you see that evolution.
The healthcare system in America is quite a contradiction. On one hand, it is thought to be the most advanced medicine. The country certainly spends the highest percentage of its GDP on healthcare. And yet, if you look at any of the metrics, the health status of the American people is not very good, including life expectancy. It's just not enough to show for what they spend. So the problem is really in the incentive in the system. The reimbursement or the payment system paying for healthcare in America is very much procedure-based. It's pay for use. So built into that narrative is the incentive for surgeons to do more surgery, you know, for radiologists to do more imaging. So that is why the cost of healthcare runs up, you know, quite enormously. Now, there's a change going on, and that is to change from that fee-for-service model to one that is called value-based, or otherwise known as capitation. Like many things in society, you know, the financial incentives are what, you know, drives change. So the way it works is, if we were a group of physicians in one practice, and we take care of, you know, 10,000 lives, 10,000 patients, the payer, whether it be government, you know, Medicare, or whether it be, you know, some private insurance company, would say, you know, I would give you, you know, $10,000 per patient per year. Now, if the patient is kept healthy, and therefore he doesn't consume $10,000 of healthcare, you get to keep some of that difference. What is interesting is, in the old days, the specialists, you know, the surgeons or the subspecialty surgeons, you know, they made the most money, as opposed to if you were a GP or a primary care physician, you don't make much money. In a place like Boston, a primary care physician may make, you know, $200,000, $250,000, whereas if you were a surgeon, you could be making $6, $7, $8 million. You know, there's quite a discrepancy. Now, with this change in value-based contracting, all of a sudden, there's the possibility for primary care physicians, you know, to make a lot of money. And I know in the Boston area, there are practices, primary care practices, where each doctor can make $500,000 a year. But finances aside, that's not why they go into medicine, at least not exclusively. What this way of delivering healthcare shifts the focus from procedures and doing more when the patient is sick to keeping the patient healthy. If you can be kept healthy, you don't consume healthcare, that's the best outcome for everyone.
So let me pursue that with Dr. Khan. We had a conclave this morning, and this issue came up. and I think it's critical that the audience understand why the goals of the regulatory bodies are not the same as the goals of the scientific community. And you have to shuttle that. You're not a regulatory body, but you're uniquely placed in evolution to be able to balance that act, which has to be done around the world. So explain that to me and to everybody, and let's get into the actual role of individuals autonomously making choices about longevity, either through new generation medications that are affordable or basic prevention.
So let's look at the process from which something is invented, whether it's a company that any of us have funded, for that to become an innovation. And we sometimes confuse the two. Invention is something that typically happens in a lab, a researcher. For it to become an innovation, it's got to change somebody's life. That invention, when it changes something's life, is truly now innovation. Forget the industry. Now, what are the steps to go from invention to innovation? You have to demonstrate as it progresses that it works, it's safe, whether it's the individual or the environment, and the regulator's role is to make sure you first do no harm. If that's the case, now it has to be scalable in the world to economically be a viable business. As you look at that spectrum and at what we do, today, there's no regulatory path for an aging drug. There's no regulatory path to say, I'm going to be investing in a company that treats a patient for longevity. The second thing is we confuse life expectancy of a population with longevity versus healthy lifespan. They're not the same thing. We know that on average, humans in developed countries live with about 20 years of disease. That 20 years of disease means lower productivity, greater cost to society, and greater burden on family and loved ones. Let's not forget that. Somebody has to take care of that individual. Unfortunately, because of gender bias, often 2/3 of the time it's a woman. And so all of these factors roots in where we look at. We as evolution look at this spectrum and say, how do we invest in science that progresses basic knowledge forward? How do you take that science, invest capital, so that not only do we invest in it, but attracts others to invest behind that? We add a lot of the scientific know-how and due diligence and put our capital to work, attracting others. This is not about being exclusive. What makes us different is 100% of the profits of our capital go back into our mission. We truly are mission-focused. Once that's happened, we're also working to influence policy and regulation by educating the policymaker. And the comment I made this morning is this becomes really an important issue when it moves from the Ministry of Health, which is where it's traditionally seen, to being also in the domain of the finance ministry. Because the cost of healthcare ultimately has to be prioritized with all the other costs, which really come together in the finance ministry. And if you look at this as an additional cost that the healthcare system needs, it cannot easily be balanced. But if it's looked at in the equation of productivity, economic effect, all of those things, suddenly finance ministers will say, all right, let me understand this better. Our job at Evolution is to really bring that. We talk about three things. We are a catalyst for this field, given what we do. We're a convener of this, and then ultimately, we are an investor in helping that accelerate. And the last point I want to make on this is that as we convene, we are by design going beyond the usual experts. This is not about convening the same biologists, again, the same venture capitalists. In fact, our meeting coming up at the end of next month is bringing together, yes, big pharma, big biotech, small biotech, investors, and scientists all at the same time. That rarely happens. But we're actually starting to attract scientists from fields that never thought about aging. There are people in physics, in engineering, in sensor technology, and material science, who when you point out the opportunity, I look at it this way. It says, whatever business you're in, every single human is a customer of yours if you think about aging as a business. 7 billion people on the planet are your customer. That's the size of your market. The question is, what can you do to change that? And once they start looking at that, the investment thesis starts to change.
So, Robin, let's play off that. How do we engage senior talent?
Well, we know it's important. Certainly in the next few decades, over 2 billion people will be over 65. So we need to have, we need to keep them engaged. I think it's very common that people become isolated, depressed. It affects their health. So we need to come up with ways that they can feel a purpose when they wake up every day, whether it's in caregiving to others, whether it's mentoring, keeping them engaged within society. We must be looking for ways that they focus on their diet, exercise, and do the things that are determinants of healthy aging. Otherwise, the caregiving will be much more of a burden.
Sergey, technology offers us huge opportunities, but the pricing around some of these is going to be challenging. So how do you decide where the opportunities are to provide solutions that people will actually use, either because they'll get through the regulatory apparatus, or they'll get reimbursed, or they're affordable for individuals to choose it themselves?
Look, I think the most exciting thing about today is that finally, through the whole history of humanity, we have something which can solve the complexity of human biology, and that's AI. More than 80% of the companies in our portfolio that we invest in use artificial intelligence. So that's why the beauty of technology is just the ability to democratize the access for next 1,000, million, and even billion people. This excites me the most. Today we have a paradigm of longevity. When we think about longer living, we think about centenarians. And the one common thing about centenarians, they all been lucky in genetic lottery. And I think these scientific discoveries in gene editing, gene therapy, epigenetics, all these fields give all of us the opportunity, been lucky in genetic lottery, and live longer, healthier, and happier life. So I think the change will come not from existing players only. The change will come from the big tech, from technology as well. So just one final thing. We tend to think that this is a watch. It's already our personalized healthcare device. This is how democratic solutions can be.
Let's end with this discussion around vanity drugs. And I just want to highlight that it's one thing to make a drug that deals with depression and just brings you back to baseline. It's another to have a drug that makes you feel better than you've ever felt and actually makes you happy. They're different things. So let's take the GLP-1 agonist, the semaglutide drugs, tirzepatide, which is Ozempic, family of drugs, Mounjaro. I'm not going to ask any of you how many put your hands up, but I bet you many in this room are on these medications. And you're on them because they make you look better. So your friends say, oh my goodness, what have you done? You must be exercising, you're eating better. Well, or you're taking Ozempic. And that's okay, because the benefit of reducing heart disease and maybe cancer, maybe reduction of different addictions, these are all now being demonstrated. Where does that play a role, Sergey and Robin? I'll come to both of you, because it's an ethical issue here, the target on drugs that maybe we can't afford to give everybody, but they would make everybody feel better, theoretically, if they were used correctly.
Well, I think it's very important. And every time we talk about health, by definition, we tend to talk about physical health. And I think it's just in the process of evolution of healthcare and medicine, we were too focused on supporting our biological body. And Robin, I think you're a better person to talk about this. I think this whole interconnection between our physical appearance and the health of our physical body, and then spiritual and the mental side of our health is extremely important. So that's why I think whether you start with the mental health or physical health, we finally, through the whole history of medicine, can retain a much more comprehensive view of human body and human health.
Robin, last 30 seconds to you.
Yeah, so I think spirituality is a very big part of centurions. You look at their genomics, but also the fact that one thing that many of them have in common is faith and spirituality. And when you talk about ethics and healthcare, it's very important that we have healthcare improvement, not just for the elderly and for healthy aging, but for the young people as well. And we need to think out of the box. And it may be providing shoes to 1.5 billion people that have foodborne illnesses that will help them not only be healthier, but get to school for the younger people. gets them more engaged playing sports, as well as looking for ways for the elderly to age in a more healthy fashion, to be more engaged for society as well as for themselves.
I want to thank all four of you very, very much. God bless you for all you've done and for all you continue to do. Stay tuned. They're changing the world. God bless.